Epic Games just released a new version of their game engine, Unreal Engine version 5.3, which brings in a ton of updates and performance improvements for next generation consoles. Let's look into this. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So I'm sure you've heard about Unreal Engine. This is one of the most popular and powerful tools for developers to make their games. And now we've got Unreal Engine 5 out in the wild. The developers are creating their games and giving feedback to Epic Games, and Epic Games reacts and improve their product. So they are releasing different updates, and this is one of these major updates that consist of many small updates and changes, and there's actually a ton of them, but I want to focus mainly on changes that will benefit consoles. I mean, all these changes is going to benefit both consoles and PC, but you know, like if you look at the very early Unreal Engine 5 games, main problem with that game engine, I guess, is it's very heavy on CPU, which kind of affects performance in many games, and we see that with very first games on both Xbox, PlayStation, and PC too. So these games are pretty heavy on PC too, but I guess with PCs you can always scale down settings or whatever, right? But not really on consoles. But anyway, let's talk about these changes. Now, first off, let's talk about one of the biggest change here is that there's actually quite a lot of improvements to increase game performance on next-gen consoles like Xbox Series SX and PlayStation 5. Epic says these improvements will help games that use the engine to go up to 60 frames per second. Which is great because we've seen too many games running at 30 frames per second this generation, and I still think that there's still going to be some games like that in the future, but I guess the more 60 frames per second games on consoles, the better, in my opinion, right? Let's just hope that this is going to become a norm. I mean, 60 frames per second, right? So yes. Okay, I'm okay with 30 frames per second games here and there, but I don't want 30 frames per second games with better graphics to become a standard. Now, one specific change that has been made that actually improves performance, and by the way, this is not the only thing that they've changed to improve performance, but this is one of the major ones. They talk about nanite that has faster performance for masked materials, including foliage, and can represent a greater range of surface due to the new explicit tangent option, while lumen with hardware ray tracing has expanded capabilities that include multiple reflection bounces and delivers faster performance on consoles. So there's actually two big changes here. Actually, like I said, there's more, but I want to focus on these two. So there's changes to nanite, which is actually the geometry engine. So there was quite a lot of talk at the very beginning of this generation how there's not going to be any issues with LODs anymore, and there's not going to be any popping and that kind of stuff, right? So that's all thanks to nanite. But nanite, especially at very early versions, had a lot of limitations. Like, for example, you could use nanite only to create static objects, right? So, for example, things that would not move at all. But unfortunately, fortunately actually, there's actually a lot of moving stuff in the game, right? So I guess you could create environments, or at least some environments that don't move and don't change using nanite, in version 5.0 or 5.1. But later they've changed that, and now you can use nanite for foliage. So that's great because it improves performance, because in previous versions, developers would have to use standard techniques which would obviously produce LODs, right? So the popping and that kind of stuff with the nanite. Now you can actually use nanite. I'm not really sure if for everything, but for way more stuff than before, which reduces LOD changes and obviously pop-in and that kind of stuff. So that's fantastic news. And obviously the Lumen, which is the lighting system, well, looks like there's some improvements in terms of performance here on consoles too. So that's very good news as well, because, you know, like geometry and the level of details plus realistic lighting, that's what's going to make a big difference when it comes to these games and, you know, making games realistic or more realistic, if you know what I mean, right? They also talk about, in this article I'm using, by the way, neowin.net, that's the article I'm using. Link will be in the description below. They also talk about some changes to the volumetric effects. So things like smoke or fire or like fog and that kind of stuff. So everything will be more realistic too. But like, guys, like these are just some of the changes. There's actually way more. Now the big change right now is that like all these changes are finally available for developers. So this is official release. There's also some experimental features, but I think experimental features, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you can play with them, test them, but I don't think you can actually release them just yet, right? So it's more for like developers having some fun with these features and then giving feedback to Epic, you know, what to change or whether or not these features actually make sense or work, right? So that's, I think that's how it works. Anyway, looks like we will be getting better games, better running games, better looking games. And not only because developers are kind of learning their way around like this, you know, how to work with this game engine and, you know, optimize better and that kind of stuff, but also because of all these changes and optimizations from Epic side of things, right? Now they still got quite a lot of work to do because, you know, this game engine is very CPU heavy. So basically, yeah, there's still some work to be done there, especially that really a lot of developers have decided to move from their own game engines to use Unreal. For example, CD Projekt Red, they are going to be using Unreal Engine 5 for their next new projects, even though they are very good with creating their own game engines. Like Cyberpunk 2077 game engine is actually great. Not only this game looks very good, it uses the latest technologies, but also it's a very CPU multi-threading kind of friendly kind of game engine, right? You can actually see big difference in terms of performance when you've got like more cores in your CPU and that kind of stuff. So, you know, it would be nice to have that in Unreal in the future too. But right now, that game engine is still very CPU heavy. And also, it's still not using things like direct storage. Developers have to use it on their own. So, you know, obviously, you know, it doesn't mean that you can't use it. It's just like it's more work. If Epic created like a direct storage plugin to the game engine, that would actually improve things big time, not only on PC, but also on consoles, right? So, yeah, looks like there's still a lot of work to be done there when it comes to development of that game engine. And hopefully that all that will translate to better looking and better running games on consoles. So guys, that's the video. That's the news I've got for you. Now, obviously, I don't think we're going to see any big changes to like current, like, you know, soon to be released games. I think these changes is probably going to be implemented for games that are 6 months or more out, because, yeah, moving like different moving your projects from one version to the other sometimes causes issues. So I don't think developers that are releasing game very soon will change that, and I don't think that these changes will ever make their way to like games that have already been released, but I'm just speculating here. But anyway, guys, that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comment section below what you think about it. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care.